Welcome to the World Today on Channels Television. I am Amarachi Ubani. Let's begin in Chile today, where a massive earthquake struck, killing 6 people and forcing thousands more to flee their homes. The 8.2 magnitude earthquake also forced authorities to declare 2 affected northern regions as disaster areas. And tens of aftershocks were also reported throughout the night, including a 6.2 tremor.
Residents living in coastal areas of Chile leave their homes in the middle of the night with few possessions, just happy to be alive. They were told to move after a massive earthquake of 8.2 magnitude in the north triggered a tsunami. Several people have been crushed to death or killed by heart attacks. Waves of up to 2.1 meters hit some areas, causing power cuts and landslides. The U.S. Geological Survey said the quake was shallow at 12.5 miles below the seabed and struck about 100 kilometers northwest of the mining port of Iquique near the Peruvian border. Meanwhile, Chile's President Michelle Bachelet made a national address in the early hours of Wednesday after the 8.2 magnitude earthquake struck off the northern coast. The president assured citizens that all necessary steps have been taken to secure their safety.
Appropriate measures have been taken to protect their lives and their belongings, and the governments will continue to work all the time. That is necessary to confront this emergency and protect our citizens.
She faced heavy criticism by Chileans for allegedly handling the 2010 8.8 magnitude earthquake and subsequent tsunami poorly, which devastated several coastal towns in central South Chile, a disaster that killed 526 people.
And African and European leaders are meeting on the sidelines of a summit in Brussels today to address the conflict in the Central African Republic. The European Union has, in the meantime, officially launched its military mission to the CAR, unveiling plans to send 1,000 troops to bolster African and French forces. The UN has warned that 19,000 Muslims are under threat in the Central African Republic.
French President François Hollande says the EU's peacekeeping mission in the troubled Central African Republic CAR has been put together. The EU had initially hoped troops would start arriving by the end of February, but shortages of soldiers and equipment were behind delays, eventually overcome thanks to last-minute offers of help from EU governments. French and African Union peacekeepers have so far failed to stop the conflict that erupted after the mostly Muslim Seleka rebels seized power a year ago in the majority Christian state. Operating out of the capital Bangui, the force of up to 1,000 soldiers will bolster 6,000 African and 2,000 French troops struggling to stop the violence in the landlocked, impoverished country that has left thousands dead. Interim president of the CAR, Catherine Samba Panza, told reporters after talks with Hollande that whilst the country had received pledges of support from the international community, procedure had held up real action. We have received many pledges, lots of announcements. We have confidence in the commitments made by our partners, but it's just that there are procedures which also have to be respected. We're simply asking the international community, given the fragile situation of the Central African Republic, to lighten these procedures and not to treat the Central African Republic's problems as if it were a normal country, but as a country in crisis. In Geneva, the UNHCR said it was trying to evacuate 19,000 Muslims urgently from Bangui and other parts of CAR who are surrounded by anti-Balaka Christian militia threatening their lives. Anti-Balaka forces control major routes to and from Bangui as well as many towns and villages in the southwest. The militia has become more militarized as it steps up attacks on Muslims and African Union peacekeepers.
We fear for the lives of 19,000 Muslims in those locations. UNHCR stands ready to assist with their evacuation to safer areas both within and outside of the country.
Mainly Muslim Seleka rebels seized power a year ago, perpetrating abuses on the majority Christian population that triggered waves of revenge attacks, leading to thousands of deaths and displacing hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, to discuss further that meeting between EU leaders and 15 African leaders have been joined now by VOA correspondents and locals in Central African Republic's capital, Bangui. She joins us now via telephone. Thanks a lot for joining us. And let's start with the purpose of the meeting. Well, it's, of course, to discuss what's going on in the CAR, but what the leaders really hope to get out of it.
Yeah, it's a two-part mission. They want to ramp up support for the deployment of these EU troops to Bangui to help reinforce the 8,000 or so African Union and French troops that are already here. And then another big aim of this meeting is to push for budgetary assistance for the Central African Republic's interim government. You know, the treasury here is empty. It's been emptied out by a year of crisis, and so they really have nothing with which to begin the process of rebuilding institutions, rebuilding the country. So a big aim, I was told by the presidency here in Bangui, of this meeting in Paris and then of this meeting in Brussels, is to kind of push for that assistance, push for those countries that have pledged funds to actually give them.
Yes, but you've been around in Bangui for a while. What have you observed security-wise? Because there are already 8,000 troops already on the ground, and it's still difficult to keep the peace in Bangui.
Yeah, there's been a spike in violence over the past few weeks. You know, at least 60 people have been killed in the past 2 weeks alone in Bangui, in clashes between the Antibalaka and the Muslims in town. There's also been increased targeting of the African Union forces. So, you know, insecurity remains a serious problem. And with that comes this question of what to do with the remaining Muslims that are here in town. Should they be evacuated? Should they not? How do we restore law and order and make people feel safe?
Well, I know the African Union a few weeks ago declared the Christian anti-Seleka group as terrorists, labeled them as terrorists because they've been targeting the Muslims, and most of them who have left Bangui. How are they reacting to that? How are they reacting to being called terrorists? Are they still standing by, you know, their first belief that the Muslims are really the problem in Central African Republic?
Yeah, you know, they're sticking to their guns. You know, they've been saying from the beginning that they want to be recognized as patriots, as the ones who drove out the Seleka rebels. That said, this movement is relatively amorphous. You know, it's a many-headed hydra. You know, there's definitely a criminality element to it. There's lots of looting. There's definitely a political element to it, with some even saying that it's the forces of the ousted President Bozide, you know, behind some of this maneuvering, behind some of this destabilizing of the current situation. So, you know, you've got, it's a complex situation, but they've stuck to their guns, and they continue to say in Bangui and in other parts of the country, the Muslims must go, that they will not tolerate their presence, that there's just been too much bad stuff that's happened over the past year, and for now, they must go.
What about the supply of aid to those who are fleeing the conflict? What's happening in the camps set up by aid agencies to care for those who are fleeing fighting in their various villages?
Yeah, really, really difficult circumstances for those displaced by the conflict. You know, here in Bangui, there are still tens of thousands of people at the airport due to continued insecurity in town. I know the aid agencies are struggling. They're struggling with resources. They're struggling with logistics. For refugees who fled across the border, for example, into Chad, I've spoken with people who were there, worked with them. Very difficult situation. I mean, not even really proper camps set up. No real assistance being brought to them.
Well, thanks a lot, Anne, for keeping us up to date. We do pray for your safety also in Bangui. And look, the VOA correspondent speaking to us live there from the Central African Republic capital, Bangui. Now, the search for the missing Malaysian plane is still on, but the Malaysian Police has warned the reasons for the plane's disappearance may never be known. And that warning comes as the country's Prime Minister Najib Razak heads to Australia for talks on the search. 10 planes and 9 ships will search the southern Indian Ocean today. A UK submarine has also joined the hunt. It's been almost 4 weeks since the flight MH370 disappeared on March the 8th as it was traveling from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. It was carrying 239 people on board.
The head of Malaysia's Department of Civil Aviation said Malaysian officials had a very good meeting with relatives of the Chinese passengers who were aboard the missing Malaysia Airlines plane, but he refused to provide any details, saying it was a closed-door meeting.
I had a meeting with the next of kin just now, the next of kin from China. There are 29 of them from 18 families. It is a closed-door meeting. We had a very good meeting with them. We answered all their questions, and I cannot give you the specifics of the meeting because it is a closed-door meeting.
The meeting took place at the hotel near Kuala Lumpur where the families are staying. Flight MH370 with 239 people on board disappeared on March the 8th, shortly after taking off from Kuala Lumpur en route to Beijing. Most of the passengers aboard the plane were Chinese. Their family members have become increasingly frustrated with the way the search has been handled and have accused the Malaysian officials of keeping information from them. In the meantime, the search for the plane continues in the Indian Ocean west of Australia. Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak is on his way to Perth to inspect the search and rescue operations, which are being conducted out of RAF Base Perth, north of the city.